Right, welcome to episode 21 of the Astrakhan's Feather. And yes, I know it's been a while. I've been away, as I say. I'm back home now in the Hawkesbury, right? This is my study here. Dogs are here as well and may well join in, unfortunately. Anyway, it's chapter 21. It's been a while, 2 weeks or so. Let's get into it. Now, just remember, so that this makes sense without you having to go all the way back, Bone Mountain Station is staffed 24/7, right? Doesn't mean to say there's a copper awake 24/7, but there has to be somebody on the premises. This evening is Bob Mullins, and he hears a noise because Karen Allen, who's the acting inspector, comes into the room while he's sleeping, and that's because she's scared, if you go back, about going to her own home. So let's carry on with the Astrakhan's Feather. Bob Mullins wakes, startled. He freezes, frowns in the darkness. It's his turn on night shift and it's his time to sleep, but he's definitely heard the rustling. He slowly turns in a single bed and sees the dark figure by the other bed, bending, moving almost silently. He breathes slow and steady, trying to get his whole heart back to normal speed. He lies as still as he can. "You want to talk?" "Go to sleep," says Karen flatly. Mullins grunts. After a few seconds he turns to face the wall. He catches the faintest whiff of French perfume mingled with something else, warm and vaguely unpleasant. If he had to put a name to it, he'd have called it fear. Anyway, on to the next chapter. Holly Dreyfus feels tired and drained but satisfied. That combination of feelings she always feels. That's a bad bit of writing, isn't it? That combination she always feels after the record's been put to bed. Before dawn, the newspaper would be in shops, on front doorsteps and lawns, and thrust into letterboxes across Bone Mountain and beyond. Job done for another week. It's a weekly paper. If anybody's having trouble with maths, okay. No one knew Holly had a key to the library, not even Bernie Reed. Thing was, Holly'd had a key since she was a small girl. Armand had got down on one knee. He'd smelled of imperial leather. She would only have been 6. "You love books so much," he'd whispered. He looked at her and smiled, and she smiled shyly herself, tilting her head. She did so love books. She imagined herself in those far-off places she read about, curled upon her bed, sunlight warming the room, words painting pictures in her mind. She could, and often did, read a book a day. Here's an interesting thing. I was ill once as a kid. I don't know what it was, chicken pox or whatever, right? Anyway, I read a whole book. I'm just trying to remember what it was called. Can't remember. Coral Island. It's called Coral Island. And I read the whole book in a day, right? Now, the point is, it's hard, isn't it, to have the luxury of doing that these days. But if you can, that's the best way to really immerse yourself in a book. Honestly, especially a good book, clearly. Anyway, Armand says to his daughter, Holly, "Here is a gift for you." He'd held up an old and heavy key, which Holly thought glowed like magic. Right. Holly shakes her head clear of the memory and puts the key in the lock. It's been a long time since she's let herself in. The lock turns without so much as a sound, but she feels the heavy bolt go back with its soft clunk. I'll come back and do some of this. Trust Bernie to keep it well oiled, she thinks. The woman's a perfectionist. Holly steps inside the familiar aroma. I'll do that again. Holly steps inside to the familiar aroma of books, beeswax and warm wood. The heat of the night is not so obvious inside the stone walls, where sound is muffled. A flash of lightning illuminates a stained glass cupola in a sudden blaze of colour. Holly looks around the darkened room. The moon has made everything go silver. Where to start? She's there searching because she knows her father has spent a good deal of time here. He and Bernie are comfortable with each other, even though flamboyant Armand, with his Bible black fedora, bright pink shirts, a cravat on occasion, the Astrakhan in winter of course, and handmade aubergine leather shoes from France, appeared to be about as far removed as could be from tweedy Severe buttoned down Bernice Reed. That's a long sentence. Holly had even wondered once or twice if there had been more than a friendship between the town's librarian and the newspaper's editor, but the thought of her father entangled in a romantic embrace with anyone, let alone Bernie, made her shudder. Parents just shouldn't be doing that. Holly hoped she'd be able to find answers here in Bone Mountain's library, answers that would lead her to a missing father. She thought long and hard about his whereabouts, eventually coming to the conclusion he must have been researching a story he was writing. A story so secret he hadn't even told Holly about it. She sighs. Or maybe she's been a bit melodramatic. Maybe he just came here for the peace and quiet. She frowns as she walks. Her volleys make the faintest squish on the flagstones. No, that wasn't Armand, wasn't him at all. The dad she knew never sought out peace and quiet, well, except when he was in a library. Quite the reverse. Her father, Armand Dreyfus, he was your action man. Not an action man in terms of like Marvel superheroes or anything, you understand. He was just a bloke who got things done, right? That's what he used to call, he's an action man, right? He gets things done. Okay, we go over, it's the same time in the evening, to Benny. And he's in a club, if you remember. Benny couldn't remember much, but he would never forget sitting at the table with a platinum blonde who had the prettiest face he'd ever seen. Her eyes were ice blue, and that seemed appropriate because in her husky accent she told him her name was Ivana, and she came from a village deep in Siberia you never have heard of. Her voice was not as deep as that, but anyway. We called it Ratuska. That exists. It was her home until 1985. Tuska did not exist. It was a Soviet secret, she said. Benny could almost feel that frozen Siberian village, and he raised his glass and took another long slug of the purple drink and shivered. He frowned at the glass. He couldn't remember the name of the drink, only that it tasted of juniper, so it could have had gin in it. Who knows? He realises he's been staring at the drink for a long time when Ivana puts a cool hand on his wrist. She must have been able to feel his pulse, which suddenly galloped away like a thoroughbred going for the line. She smiles and strokes his skin, and he almost groans out loud. In fact, he might well have done. He was that woozy he could barely tell reality from Juniper Dreamland. He felt like he was held together by elastic bands. He wondered what was in the drink, but then laughed out loud. Who the fuck cared? He was shouting above the music to Ivana about Russia. She was telling him about the village she came from. Their faces inches from each other. They made weapons of mass destruction there, she said, in a bad Russian accent. Atomic weapons, chemical weapons. The town was closed to all except us, those of us who called it home, and the army of scientists and soldiers. She'd smiled dreamily, and Benny thought her mind was probably still there in Siberia. The streets, it was a clean. Yeah, why were that? Why is that? Why were the streets clean? She threw. They kept sweeping them, I guess. She looked into his eyes. Would you like to see me with no clothes on? Benny almost dropped his drink. A strong arm clamped around his shoulders. He smelt Cooper Blackwell there. Having a good time, matey? I see you met Sally. She tell you she's from Siberia. Ivana glares at Cooper, beautiful eyes icy. Coop laughs, or maybe Bucharest, wherever the fuck that is. Ivana shakes her head, gets up from the table quickly, turns on her heel, and as she walks away, the cops sway with drink and do close surveillance on her arse. I know, sexual undercurrent, it is there, isn't it? But wait till we get on the next bit. Oh dear. Coop laughed, hugging Benny tightly and shouting through the noise, Double B, the night is young. Benny lifts a corner of his mouth. Thanks to the drink, it's all he could do. He felt like he'd had a stroke. As he recalled, and it was more than just hazy, sometime much later he was bundled clumsily into a vehicle, vision blurred, brain soggy, arms and legs not doing what they were asked. Somehow he knew it was Coop's ute. Maybe it was the smell. I just added that. As they sped through the night, windows down, let me just add that in, right? Because otherwise I'll forget. Nice. Thank you. As they sped through the night, windows down, warm air rippling his clothes, he laughs and sees Coop at the wheel look at him. Coop seems to be hovering there, but Benny knew it was just the drink. He wasn't used to drinking a lot, and they had drunk a lot, and danced too, he seemed to recall, though remembering it was like seeing someone else up there on the dance floor. He knew they were on their way home because the ute's nose was pointed up, maybe not as much as Benny thought, but up the mountain they were going. All right, Double B. Benny grinned at him and drawled. Coop looked back at the road and then his eyes opened wide. He yanks the steering wheel hard over, but it isn't soon enough. Benny feels a shudder go through the ute as it smacks into something hard. Coop keeps going, face white. He glances at Benny. Fucking Roo on the road. Big one too. Couldn't avoid him. Ah, yeah? Coop smiles. Yeah, Roo's. Benny leans back in the seat and goes to sleep as the ute thunders on. Coop looks at him and grunts. Whatever it had been, it was big. He clenches his hands tight on the steering wheel and grits his teeth. Big enough to have been a man. Do, do, do. Okay, here we go. We're gonna, and at the same time, on the mountain, Miles Blanchette, real estate agent. Miles stretches like a big bear. Now remember Miles, he oozes charisma, as his ex-wife told Christ. Miles stretches like a big bear waking from hibernation. Silent air conditioning courses through the house. He reclines in the mesh aero. He's naked, hairy, he's bear-like. Floor-to-ceiling smoky windows look down on the town far below where it sparkles like Christmas. Miles smiles, groans softly. He's made a stupendous amount of money selling other people's homes, so it was only right he lived in what he was confident was the best house on the mountain, or as he might put it, unbeatable 360-degree soaring views to take your breath away and send your mind into a delight of panoramic bliss. In this splendid architect-designed home. Let me ask you something. Real estate agents, right, they always do this, don't they? The architect-designed home. Who else would design the home? The butcher? Like, you're not going to go to your local butcher, are you, and go, hey, mate, could you just draw me up a house, design me a house? You go to an architect. They're all architect design, right? Yeah? Okay. In this splendid architect design home with all modern appliances, you can live the dream and never want to leave its comforting arms. It's your own special resort on the mountain. There is only one property higher on the mountain. Miles gazes up at his darkened ceiling, softly lit as the night sky by a myriad of twinkling LED lights. He'd had it designed with the southern skies in mind, each of the thousands of pinprick lights matching the real night sky, or so he'd been told by the designer. He wasn't going to argue about it. Who's going to count the stars? That's not there, I've just added it. Perversely, it was one of the most expensive features of what was overall a stupendously expensive house. Miles reckoned the glowing ceiling was worth every cent though. Outside, where Miles's mind was headed, far above and beyond the ceiling, the old bone house sits perched at the highest point of the mountain. Its views unassailable, its solid stone walls constantly buffeted by the strong winds racing up the escarpment. The near constant breeze could turn nasty, as it did one night in December 1993. And remember, that's summer in Australia, right? Not winter. It's a strange thing. They still dress up like Santa. It's summer. I don't know. Despite the house's solid Georgian walls, buttresses and gargoyles, it couldn't escape or survive the great fire that ripped through the bush behind it, wind from the cliffside sucking the blaze onwards like something demonic. No one really knew how it had happened, so sudden and all, though rumours abounded. Miles smiled. His hands were clean. He'd swear that in court on the Bible. Miles went to church every Sunday, though in fairness, he saw that more along the lines of keeping the customer satisfied. Many boners were deeply religious. Didn't hurt. They thought Miles was too. That dog in the background is Leo, and he wants to go out. Just a second, I'll let him go out. And we carry on. Many boners were deeply religious. Didn't hurt, they thought Miles was too. He reckoned when it came time to sell their house, those who were smitten with what he thought of as the God bug would look heavenwards, and a light would pop on and they would hold an index finger up and say, of course, Miles Blanchette, a church-going, God-fearing man, who better could we choose to sell our home. There certainly had been instances where Miles moved a house he thought only God could have sold, so he believed it would be true to say he was a believer. He'd often say, God is on our side, even if sometimes he moves in mysterious ways, as of course do interest rates, was a jocular quote he used with new home sellers to break the ice. Truly, thought Miles as he shifts slightly in the chair, making a low guttural noise in his throat. Eyes closed now. There were many mysteries in life. Too many to even get to the end of. I've just added that in. I'll stop doing that. It had all changed a great deal since he'd first set up shop in Bone Mountains High Street, squeezed in there between the bakery and the butcher, an unbeatable high street location, as he might have said. It had suited him, not least because the harried baker's wife Adele was a red-haired, horny cow with smoky blue eyes. Miles wasted no time introducing her to the benefits of reverse mortgage positions, which soon led to reverse cowgirl. It's a sexual position, apparently. He had to smile because when she'd warmly handled his cock in the privacy of his back office, the air smelt of freshly baked bread rolls. It was a perfect combination. She could need him any time, he told her with his trademark leer, and she'd rolled her eyes, he imagined with pleasure. Probably not. Miles's wife Marie's money had set him off, thank you very much, though she grumbled too much for his liking when he bought his first Jaguar. You've hardly got the business going, she'd said, and you're buying yourself a luxury car. Miles had smiled, but underneath he was bitching. But, sweet, he said, image is everything in the real estate game, you know that. It's how you get ahead. Hard work got my father ahead, she'd said, head to one side, looking at him almost in pity. He built a whole business out of sheer work, hard work, Miles. Jesus, he thought, Daddy was big in scrap metal. There was something you could shout from the rooftops. Not. Still, as always, Miles got his way. Back in those days, he only had to fuck her and she was putty. One day he slapped her about a bit to show her who was boss, and next you knew, Daddy's little girl was taking it hard from behind over the arm of the Chesterfield. Dad'll teach her, he thought, as he pistoned into her over and over again. He wasn't sure what was squealing most, Marie or the leather. Next day he bought a golden Jaguar, the one with a beast of a V12 engine. Beautiful machine, that. Fucking her again, he thought, with a smile as he handed over a cheque for the full amount, courtesy of wife's trust fund. Miles groans and closes his eyes and shifts his naked shoulders in a chair. It all seems so easy now, but back in the day he'd struggled at first, no doubt about it. But he smiles when he thinks back to that fateful day Ray Lucas had come whistling through the door and winked, big smile on his face. Wondering if we could do some business, he said. Miles had laughed and said, could we just? He knew a hustler when he saw one. He wasn't sure how he knew, he guessed it was just something in the Blanchette DNA, but no, he did. Come on into my office, Miles said with a honeyed voice, bowing ever so slightly, holding out an inviting hand which he swept towards a small back room. I've a better idea, smiled Ray. Why don't you come to my place? When Miles saw the chateau, he knew he'd arrived. Thank you very bloody much. But that was then and this was now. All of a sudden he has a spasm, a tremble shoots through him. His heartbeat climbs quickly, dangerously. He claws at the chair. His groin heaves up and he lets out a great cry that stretches into a deathly scream. He slumps back in the chair and is silent. You don't say much. Miles slowly opens his hooded eyes and looks down at the blonde who'd swallowed. You ever talk to your wife when you're having sex? Miles laughs low, not unless there's a phone handy. Well, we'll leave it there. At the climax. Alright. Yeah, do subscribe if you're still with us. And another episode soon. Bye. I'm just trying to find my mouse. It's all over the shop at the moment. Hang on. Here we go. See you later.